Hi, this is Dan Joyce at the Kenosha Public Museums. Welcome to Kenosha Conning again. Kenosha Conning is the Potawatomi Indian village that was here at Kenosha probably since the late 1700s. So it was here for quite a while, up until about 1830. 1835, the area was settled by Euro-Americans. So by that time, the Potawatomi had ceded their land and were on their way being forcefully moved west. But the village of Kenosha Conning was pretty large. It was about a mile long along the Pike River. It went from today's Kenosha Harbor inland all the way into Washington Park, which is quite a ways. That's the winter village, and this is what we see here. We see a winter village. The winter villages had wigwams, and wigwams are the dome-shaped structures like this. They conserve heat very nicely. They were insulated, actually. You'd get a double layer of bark on the outside and you put moss in between. But you've got your fire in the center, you've got a fire hole in the top, and the primary activity during the winter, besides some winter hunting, is a lot of storytelling. A lot of traditions are handed down during the winter. So that's what we see in this scene. We see an elder over here to the right. He's telling a story. He's got some wampum beads in his hand. And then off to the left, we have a young mother along with her baby in a cradle, an upright cradle, listening to the stories. Welcome to springtime at Kenosha Conning. In the late winter, early spring, once you get temperatures above freezing during the day, the sap starts to flow in the sugar maple trees. So it's maple sugaring time. There are certain areas that people would go out to called the sugar bush. That's the area of dense concentration of maples. Here in Kenosha, there's an area north of town that is now a county park called Petrifying Springs. That area was used extensively for maple sugaring at the time. And we see the holes. The holes are drilled into the trees. There's little troughs that come out of it, and then we have buckets below that. And the maple sap comes out of there, and you need about 40 gallons of maple sap to boil down into 1 gallon of maple syrup. Now that's what we eat today is maple syrup. What they did back then is they boiled it a little bit further and stirred it, and they made it into maple sugar. That way they can take the maple sugar, they can put it into molds that they had carved out of wood. A lot of times you'll see a board with a lot of little circular patterned holes in them, partial holes, little troughs, where they'd put the sugar in there and have it form up into a nice form. You can see in the background mural, we've got the boiling going on. You can actually see some of the troughs down below. We've got stirring of the maple sugar in the background. We've got chopping of wood for fire. Lots of activities going on in the mural that relate to the 3D portion of this tableau. We also have all of our sugaring equipment over here. You've got big troughs here. You've got birch bark baskets. And of course, you've got trade kettles. Once trade kettles came in, you get those from the Euro-Americans, you could do some serious maple syrup boiling. Here we are in the summertime. During the winter, we had the domed wigwam. A lot of the domed wigwams were away from windy areas like our lakeshore. You will find them down on river floodplains where they're protected from the wind a little bit. But during the summer, they take all that bark off of the framework of the wigwam and they put it on another framework that's closer to the shoreline. In our case, Kenosha's shoreline is Lake Michigan, of course. And it's a whole different type of house. This is kind of a miniature version of a summer house. It's rectangular. It has a gable roof on it. It's very different from the dome-structured wigwam. But a lot of the inside is the same. You have lots of trade goods. When Europeans come through the area, initially in the 1670s, by the late 1600s, there's trade networks all over the place. By the 1700s, trade is going almost from coast to coast, believe it or not. It's pretty amazing how things travel. With the fur trade, there's European goods, there's lots of metal. There's lots of fabric. If you notice, this scene here, when we see the people in here, you'll see them clothed in European cloth, a lot of wool, cotton, linen, that sort of thing. Those are all trade goods. The largest item in the trade industry was fabric, actually, and after that was metal. Things like tomahawks, axes, knives, and trade guns. But you've got a great bed in the background here, a nice cozy deerskin to lay on. No blanket, because it's summer, you don't need one. But blankets were a big part of the fur trade as well. In these buildings or in these houses, the winter included, you'll start to spot different things. You'll see, like up in the corner here, there's a pair of antlers on a string. When you're going, well, what are those? Well, when you're out deer hunting, you start clacking those together like two males are fighting, and they'll attract more deer. So you're trying to attract deer by imitating what they're doing. So there's lots of little details like that that you can see in all of these scenarios. In the summertime also, it's a great time for obviously outdoor activities, just like today. Again, if you start looking at details of the outside of the house here, you can start to see all kinds of things. We have hose, we have steel hose or metal hose, we have stone hose, we have trade saddles. Saddles were big. As soon as they could start getting European style saddles, they really liked that. One of the things we have in here also is a baby cradle. This is probably one of the most effective, simple things around. This is two strings going through the edge of a blanket with a stick inside holding it apart, and it's the greatest baby cradle, a little baby swing. The woman down below is making a basket. A lot of activities like that go on year-round, but you can also see some of the foods that are being gathered. We've got all the gardens going. We're growing corn, beans, squash. We're gathering berries as we get towards the end of summer. And one of the things that nobody knows what it is, and I'll show you here, is this thing. Looks like a giant nut. And actually what it is, it's a bird that they hunted, and they put it in clay and mud, and then they bake it like that. They just put it in the fire. And then you can break the clay off, and you've got a nice roasted bird. So one of the little secrets of the summer scene. Okay, we're at the fall scene. We've got wild ricing going on. Even as far south as where we're at, where you really don't see wild rice anymore, we had wild rice. Wild rice is one of the big staple grains for Native Americans in the upper Midwest. What they would do, it's basically a grass seed. It's not really a rice. It's kind of different, but it is a wonderful source of nutrition. What they would do is they would take the stalks and tie them together like this, and then they would dry. And then you go by on the canoe and bend these stalks over when the seed is ripe and just hit them with sticks, ricing sticks. And that all of the rice falls into your canoe. So you end up with a canoe full of rice. Well, what do you do with it then? You do this. You get the young boys to kind of jump up and down on these poles with the rice down in here, and it's basically taking the husk away from the rice. So you can actually prepare it. Really wonderful to store for winter. It's dry. You don't really have to do much to it. But they would make big storage pits like this. In the fall, they're gathering all their ripe crops. They're gathering all kinds of berries. You've got corn, bean, squash of various sorts, wild rice, all the berries, all the nuts. You're storing these in underground caches, and they would keep for quite a while. Remember, you're preparing for winter. Winter is a time where things are a little slim as far as food resources go. So you really need to build up enough food to keep you going through the winter. Winter hunting is a little bit, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But during the fall, it really does. And we've got deer over here, and in the end, down there, we have women processing gathered nuts. So this is all about food. That's what the fall is about.